So we're going to start before you met Charlie and ask, did you ever have a crush on anybody before you met Charlie?
Yes, I did.
Anything you'd be willing to talk about?
Well, sure, you know, it's so long ago. I really did. It was when I was 16. Now, remember, I had just started college, and my parents knew the young man. They had nothing against him, and he asked me to go on a date to a movie. And I said I'd ask my parents for permission, and I did, and my mother said, they said, okay. On Thursday of that week, before the Sunday of the day, Saturday of the day, I was washing the dishes and I dropped a glass, and it broke. And it was one of these memorial candle glasses that, you know, when the wax is out, you have a glass if you want. And so it was not a piece of crystal. But my mother seized on that to say, okay, that's it. You can't go on the date. And I remember pleading with her, Mom, no, you know, we're sacrificing for you to go to college, and you're going to start twisting your brain, your thinking with boyfriends, and that'll be the end of your education. So I said, no, it won't. But I already told him that I would go. Just let me go this once. They wouldn't agree. I had to go to his home and tell him, and I told him the truth. And that was the end of my going out on a date. But he had a talent for drawing. In fact, he ended up being a high school art teacher. But, so that was the end of that, you know, as far as my dating, until I met Dad. Well, he had just come home from the service. He was in the Navy, you know. And his parents, it was in the summertime, his parents had a bungalow in the country that they'd go to on the weekends. And there was a hotel nearby, and they had, on Saturday night, they had a dance there. Well, you know, you'd sneak into the grounds and go in. And he met this girl who belonged to my house plan, you know. We couldn't afford sororities. We had what they call a house plan. That was affordable. And she was helping form new house plans, especially the boys that were returning from service. And when she saw someone she thought was particularly nice, she put him in this newly formed house plan. I don't know why I forgot the name of it, but it was named after a serviceman that had died, you know. So they honored him by giving him the name of the house plan. And that became like our brother house plan. Asnes was the girls, and I forget what the boy, Bachelor. That fellow's name happened to be Bachelor. So it was Bachelor House. And she said that when he came, he told her that he was going to resume going to college at Brooklyn College. She said, oh, that's where I go, and why don't you look me up, and so forth. So what happened as a consequence is that we would sit down at a certain table in the cafeteria when we had lunch, you know, a whole group of boys and girls, and he came down. And in fact, he dated her a couple of times. One day, my friend, another friend of mine that was there, said she was going to the bowling, I think it was. And he said, gee, I'd like to go. He said, well, somehow he got the feeling that this other girl, Barbara, her niece, Bunny they called her, he said, I have nobody to ask. She said, why don't you ask Gloria? And that's it. So he asked me, and I told him, remembering my experience, I have to ask my parents. And my parents said yes. By this time I was 18. I was already a junior. And they said yes. I was delighted, and I told him, you know, go on a date like all my friends were going on dates. And then I realized that I had just started to take singing lessons, and it conflicted with that, and I had to go and tell him that I couldn't do it. He said, all right, he understood, and that was that. But then at the table they started speaking about what they were going to do on the weekend, and so he asked me again if I could go on that day, and I said yes. So we went out, a double date, you know. The thing about him that I liked was that he was very gentlemanly. He didn't hold my hand. I mean, but my mother was waiting for me when I came home to ask me how the date went, and I said, Ma, you know, he only says yes, no, or maybe. Doesn't really talk. I had to do all the talking, and my mother said, you know, sometimes people are deep that way. Okay. Because when we got to the door, and he said good night, no kissing, he asked me for the next week. And I said yes because I wanted to be like the other girls, you know, who were going out on dates. And then he asked me for the next week. And this went on for 6 weeks. At which point, one morning, my father said, what's going on? I see this boy coming. I said, nothing, Papa, you know. He likes me. Well, he said, what are his intentions? I'm going to ask him. Papa, you can't do that, Papa. They don't do that these days. No, if he has any respect for you, he'll understand. I don't object to you going out with him, but if he's not serious about you, you're not going to go out with him every week. You'll have to meet other people besides. Well, I would meet Charlie I had to take 2 trolleys, and the second one was the one he was coming from where he lived. And I told him that my father might be doing that. He said, that's okay. You know, it wouldn't faze him. Nothing happened for about 2 weeks. You know, one Friday night, he came over, and I hear my father say, Charlie, come in the living room. I'd like to talk to you. And I remember standing at the sink. My mother had laid down to rest, and I'm doing the dishes. There's this soapy water, and my tears are dripping down into the water. And finally he came out. His face was a little red, and he said, are you finished? I was finished with the dishes. Let's go for a walk. And he told me my father had asked him what his intention, what did he want to be? And he said he was hoping to be a physician. And my father said, well, first my father asked if he was serious, and he said yes. I mean, do you intend to marry her? And he said yes. And he said, but if you want to be a doctor, that's a long haul. Why do you want to tie yourself down to one girl? See, I don't want my daughter to go out with you for a number of years, and then you decide, I don't want my daughter's heartbroken. So if you're not going to be serious, I have no objection for her going to work and helping support you, that's fine. But when she graduates, you get married. That's my terms. And he said, okay. So when he went home, and I guess he told his parents, they were not quite as thrilled. Their concept was that he should go away to medical school, and I should go to work and save some money for when he came home, that I could buy him a car or something. And my father said no. But they get married. So consequently, I graduated on June 14th, and I was married on June 18th. Oh yes, to the day we were married. We actually, from the time we met, 2 years and 8 months before we got married. And when we were first dating, my father said to me one day, what is this business? He comes in and doesn't his mother feed him? You have to have cookies and milk, I said. And then you go in the living room. I don't like that business. You say goodnight in the hall. And the curfew, and don't forget we didn't have a car. 1 o'clock, that's your curfew. And let me tell you, at 1 o'clock, we would be standing in the hall talking. He'd bang on the other side of the door and say, Goldie, time to come in. Till the day we were married, we had that curfew, and we lived by it.
Was there ever a time you missed it?
There might have been maybe on prom night or something like that, that he gave us a little extra time, but actually we didn't. We weren't the kind of kids, to thwart, to rebel that way. My parents said that was enough. 1 o'clock in the morning is enough to be out and shown. You'll see him the next day or the next week, Actually, I saw him in school, so. Because before that time that my father spoke to him, I mean, we had only gone out on a few dates, he said, we were coming out of the Roxy movie on a Saturday night, and he said, I told my parents today that I've met the girl I want to marry. And I said, really? Who? So that's how that happened, yeah. But he said, he gave me a watch, and it was the style to have the setting on the watch had little rubies and little diamonds. And I said, is this our engagement? He said, no, my parents intend to give me a ring to give to you.
And my grandparents were, they were surprised. I had been going out with a red-headed female.
Oh yeah, he had.
Every Angela, and she had been to my one of my graduations. And she said, I thought you were going to get married to her. I said, no.
Oh, that was a delightful story. So one day, we were going to go to a football game at Brooklyn College, and it was in October. His parents had gotten this ring. They had it at the house, and originally they were going to give it to me on my birthday in November. But my mother-in-law's sister was visiting, and they showed her the ring. They started, why do we have to wait? He called me on the phone, and he said, why don't you come over to my house, and we'll go to the football game from there. And I remember how I was grumbling to myself that I had to go. He didn't come to my house, that I would, grumbling. I get there, and first thing I do is go to the bathroom to check my hair. And I come out, and he looks perfectly relaxed. Here I thought we were rushing to get to the game. And he's carrying toward me a bowl of fruit. Would you like some fruit? And it annoyed me. We have to go, and he's asking me if I'd like to have some fruit. And then I saw that in an apple he had cut out, and there was a ring inside the apple that was shining. So that's how I called my parents right away to tell them, but then we went off to the football game, My parents made a lovely wedding for me. They did everything, and I was the kind of girl, I didn't care. I was glad that that responsibility was taken out of my hands. I mean, my mother showed me the invitation they were choosing, they're fine. She told me what they were going to serve. I mean, I was not one of these, I was just grateful they were doing something. In fact, I borrowed my gown. I wasn't going to tell them I want to have this or this. I didn't. We didn't have, we had ushers. We didn't have bridesmaids because we didn't want to have any of my friends have an expense to go out to get a gown. Except for my little sister, who was 4 years old the day that we were married and wore the cutest little organdy dress. And my parents took every bit of money that they had in the bank. And in those days, it was a couple of $1,000. And my father borrowed some money from his brothers, and with the expectation that after the wedding we'd be getting gifts that we could give them some money to pay them back, which is what we did do, because we never told that to his parents. But it was wonderful because everybody was alive. I had 3 grandparents at the time. Only my grandmother Esther had died before. But they were there, and was very joyful. On one side, on my father's side, I'm the oldest grandchild. When my father and mother got married, his sisters weren't even married at that time, So it was very joyful. The cousins were all there, everybody dressed up. It really was wonderful. And my grandmother, Sarah, had the special pleasure of accompanying me to the mikveh before I got married. She stayed in the waiting room, and she was beaming. She was just beaming that her granddaughter was getting married. Anyway, what I wanted to say, the memory about my wedding was, of course, my sister, as I said, that was her 4th birthday, and we promised to get her a doll, and we got the doll dressed in the same color organdy that she was wearing. She had those banana curls, you know. But she didn't understand that, well, we went on our honeymoon. So we were the last to leave the catering hall, and my parents, we got a taxi. Well, I think maybe somebody drove us up to the hotel in Manhattan, and my parents were getting a taxi to take them back to Brooklyn. And she realized I wasn't coming with them, and in the street, she started to cry bitterly, and she took that doll and threw it on the floor.
Oh.
So angry. But however my parents spoke to her, the next day when I called, she had calmed down. I told her I was going to bring something back for, the following week when I got home. But she was so upset. And as it turned out, for the first 3 months, we did live with my parents, Oh, they always served the usual, what would we call them, franks and blank. They,
Was it catered?
Yes, oh, absolutely. And I remember that my grandfather, Eli, said to my father, "Are you having beer?" My father said no, because, he's responsible for the... No, actually, I think the groom paid for the liquor. My grandfather said, "I'm paying for the beer. She's getting married." Don't forget, I was the first grandchild. "There's going to be beer." So there was beer. But I don't remember the menu. Someplace I might have, in one of the many boxes, there might be a wedding menu. But
was there dancing?
You could be sure one thing was there: stuffed derma.
Ooh.
That definitely was on the menu. It was de rigueur. It's very tasty. That's for sure. It might have been chicken. I think it was probably roast chicken.
Did you dance at the end? I mean, after the...
Oh, yes. I should remember what the song was that I picked for it. Yeah, I did.
So it was just the way a wedding would be today.
Yeah.
So you would dance with your dad.
Yeah.
And you would...
I don't remember now if I did, because I might have said no, because I would get too emotional, my daddy. I don't think I danced with my father. I don't think we did that. We went to a hotel because it was the Dixie Hotel in Manhattan, and downstairs was a bus terminal, the Dixie bus terminal. That took us up to the Catskills. I picked that hotel, now I forget the name, because I liked their advertisement. It was a deer. I forget the name of the hotel. We were there a week, and we met a couple of other couples there, and it was really very nice.
So for your honeymoon, you went to the Catskills?
Yeah. Not only that, Row. White Row was the name of the hotel. I don't think it exists anymore. But one of the things I did that week was they offered a course in cooking to, the brides that were there, and I remember taking that. And
do you remember anything about it?
I remember they had a big lake, and we went in the canoe, and I was singing on the lake, and I remember that, yeah. And then we took the bus back, and then the train back to Brooklyn. So for the first 3 months, we lived my brother went into the living room and slept on the cot, and my sister was still sleeping in the crib in my parents' room, so we had the room. And I was working, and Charlie graduated. I graduated in June, he graduated in the summer, finished up. By Labor Day, we had found one of those furnished places on right opposite the Joan of Arc school in Manhattan. We were in the ground apartment of those houses that are there. It was really nice. I really liked it. It was one big room and then a bathroom.
Right.
He couldn't find a school because everybody was taking advantage of the GI Bill. So he went to do some postgraduate work at NYU, and there he met a young man who wanted to go to medical school also, and told Charlie about applying in Europe, recognized by the AMA. They went to Switzerland. They spent a year there, and it was very crowded. They weren't totally happy there, and the consulate said, why don't you go to Amsterdam? It's approved by the AMA, and even though they allow you to use English, you know, so.
You wanted to add something.
I went there with two friends that I made in Switzerland. The three of us went
To Switzerland,
to
yeah.
Switzerland.
Do you remember their names?
One was,
Something Cash.
yeah,
The second name was Cash, and
Cash.
the other one I forget. Anyway,
they were two brothers.
yeah,
The name is Stanley.
that was the other one. He became a physician down in at Long Island someplace. He was
Yeah.
the tall, skinny guy.
Then he transferred to, we were up in the Bronx. He transferred to the Bronx, and she was sick, was very sick. And he
Stanley
happened to
had
be on
nothing to do
call.
with that.
He happened to be on call, and took care of her. She doesn't realize it.
Maybe I forgot. All right. What happened is when we moved there and he went to NYU, took a course in hematology, and met this fellow, Norm Cash, that I said, spoke about them applying and going to school in Europe. So I had gotten a job in an office. And so what happened is he went to that school and I went back to live with my parents. But by this time they had moved up to the Bronx, the Project Pelham Parkway houses.
Your parents had.
Yeah, had moved there, and I taught. I got my license teaching in the Bronx, and he went to. So he would come home, you know, when the semester was over in the spring, and then go back in the fall. The second time, though, I had saved up money, so I went with him. I was there for a while. But what was difficult was saying goodbye to him each time, because I couldn't afford to be with him all the time. I think because physical challenges come into play as you get older, I think it becomes more meaningful as it becomes more challenging, because you know you have a partner that suddenly doesn't hear, or that has trouble with their feet, whatever it is, or has a disease. There's a challenge, comes down with some sort of a challenging disease. So you have to go deeper as you get older. For that, to keep that feeling that you had when you first started. You don't expect as much from each other. It works both ways, that there are things and habits that either partner acquires may be annoying. You have to find a way to cope with it. I think it just has more meaning, and it becomes more precious. It was much easier for me, for instance, to take off and spend 3 weeks with my sister in California when Charlie had a job and he was working all that. I could not do that again. I mean, we have a bat mitzvah coming up. If Charlie's able to go, I'll go. If he's not, I wouldn't go and leave him home. I just wouldn't do that. I couldn't really enjoy myself. I'd have to The other person would have to understand, I just couldn't leave him. I mean, I could leave him for a couple of hours, but it just isn't worth it. I think I would want them to be kind to each other, to be patient. You know, it's an adjustment to learn to share with somebody. It's one thing, you say goodnight on the date and they go home. It's another thing to be hanging your stockings over the bathtub, you know, when he wants to take a shower. So there are things you have to get used to, adjust. And I think you have to learn to compromise, as long as one isn't winning all of the battles. I think you have to give yourself time to be together. We didn't have the kind of distractions that young people have today with their iPads and all, that takes them away from each other. I think it's important to make the time to sit and eat together, not I'm running off to the gym or I'm doing this. I don't think that's healthy. I think you have to spend some time together. I think try always to give your partner the benefit of the doubt when something bothers you, or talk it out. You know, say, you know, this is bothering me, and because most of the time you'd be surprised, you know, at what they're really thinking. It's a commitment, and I don't think you should think of it as a situation, well, if it doesn't work, we'll get a divorce. I don't think you should get married with that kind of attitude. I think you should get married understanding that that's for life. And somehow or other you're going to find. Now, like a lot of things, that there are exceptions, you know. I certainly wouldn't condone somebody beating somebody up or thinking he can have a little affair on the aside. You know, that's not in my thinking. But I think many times people divorce lightly and they regret it. Because whatever they think they're going to get, they don't. It's part of the adjustment. I mean, Charlie had a cousin that when he got married the second time, I remember him saying to us, well, you know, we learned from our experience, both he and the woman that he married again, and we were better for it. You know, we won't make the same mistakes. They did. But he must have they must have enjoyed getting married because they got married again. I think there's something to be gained from gritting your teeth and going on.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is. Whatever it takes, whether it takes taking a deep breath or going into another room, but it's worth it in the end. Because a lot of things that we think are so important, in retrospect, are not really. At the moment they are. But you have to give yourself a chance to think a little bit again. Sacrifice.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. True love is sacrifice. And whether it's love of a child or love of a husband or love of a parent, there's an element of compromise and sacrifice in it. You have to sacrifice yourself, but it's worth it. It ends up, it's worth it. The payoff is the feeling you have inside you, knowing that you've done the right thing. I think that's something you feel. I don't know that I could put it in words. It's a feeling. Like, how can you tell somebody how the sensation of seeing a beautiful flower open? It's something you feel. And so you feel that satisfaction of having come through.